Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we walk through one of the most famous and, frankly, profoundly unsettling cases of a wilderness vanishing in American history, exploring the source material that defines this enduring cold case.
It really is. It's a tragedy that serves as such a stark reminder of the immense power of the wilderness. It forces us to grapple with that terrifying possibility that sometimes a person can simply cease to exist.
It's precisely the emotional core we're examining. Imagine turning your head for just a moment, and when you look back, your child is gone. Not a sound, not a trace, just silence. We're going to explore the complete disappearance of 6-year-old Dennis Lloyd Martin.
And this happened, way back in 1969, June 14th, Father's Day weekend in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This wasn't just a small news story that faded away. It became a crisis. It triggered the largest and probably most controversial search operation the park had ever seen. And the result, 0 answers, still.
Right, so our mission today, looking at all the sources we've gathered, is to really unpack the exact circumstances, almost moment by moment, of Dennis's vanishing. We'll detail the truly massive and kind of unusual response it sparked, and then we'll rigorously analyze the conflicting theories, everything from, brutal environmental exposure to potential human abduction theories that have just failed to provide any certainty for, more than 5 decades now?
Yeah, over 50 years.
Yeah.
And to really understand why it failed, why there are no answers, we have to set the stage properly. Dennis Lloyd Martin. He was just 6 years old, actually only 6 days shy of his 7th birthday, visiting from Knoxville, Tennessee. And this trip, it wasn't just a random camping trip. It was an established family ritual, an annual thing.
Okay, so he was part of a bigger group then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Multi-generational. You had his father, William Martin, his older brother, his grandfather, and several cousins too. They were camping near Stents Field. It's this beautiful, high-altitude meadow, but incredibly remote. Straddles the Appalachian Trail, deep in the Tennessee section of the Great Smoky Mountains.
And remote really is the key word here, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're talking high-altitude, dense Appalachian forest. The terrain itself is just challenging. Steep slopes, these thick rhododendron thickets they call hells, complex geology. You have to picture this landscape because the land itself is really the first character in this whole mystery.
Okay, so let's pinpoint the moment he vanished. It was around 4:30 p.m. that Saturday afternoon, June 14th. The kids were doing something completely normal, totally innocent. They were planning a hide-and-seek prank.
Right. The classic let's all hide and jump out to scare the grown-ups kind of thing. Very typical kid behavior on a camping trip.
And this is the moment of the last confirmed sighting. Dennis was wearing a bright red t-shirt and blue shorts, clothing specifically picked out apparently to be visible in the woods.
His father, William, actually watched him, saw Dennis peel away from the other kids, dart behind this clump of bushes, maybe some rhododendrons, to find his hiding spot.
Just like the other kids are doing.
Exactly. The expectation was, naturally, that Dennis would pop out with the rest of them in a minute for the big surprise.
But he didn't. The other cousins, his brother, they all emerged, ready for the joke, but no Dennis.
So William Martin, the father, he started searching almost immediately. Within 5 minutes, the sources say. Which is, exactly the response you'd expect from a parent. Instant alarm.
But that immediate action, that gut reaction, it was instantly hampered by just how remote they were.
Totally nullified, really. Even though his dad was looking within minutes, they were miles from anywhere they could get help or even make a call. This is such a critical failure point in those first crucial hours.
Right, you couldn't just whip out a cell phone in 1969 in the middle of the Smokies. There was no 911 call from the campsite.
No way. Our sources all confirm that Dennis's grandfather had to undertake this just grueling hike. About 9 miles through really difficult terrain.
9 miles.
Yeah.
Just to get help.
9 miles. To reach the nearest ranger station, which was down at Cades Cove.
Wow. That's a huge distance, especially when you're panicked and racing against time.
Absolutely massive. Think about the timeline. Disappearance around 4:30 p.m. The grandfather starts hiking. But an organized official search, meaning park rangers, proper equipment, setting up a command post that wasn't launched until 8:30 p.m.
4 hours, that 4-hour gap.
It's huge. 4 hours lost, compounded by the fact that even when they did start, pinpointing the exact search area immediately was tough. It proved disastrous.
And as if that time delay wasn't bad enough, nature itself just delivered this devastating blow. Almost as soon as the official search was getting underway, the weather turned.
Yeah, it wasn't just a little shower either. A massive front rolled in. A heavy, heavy downpour started that evening, dumped about 3 inches of rain in a pretty short period.
3 inches, that's significant.
Hugely significant. And that torrential rain did way more than just make the search conditions miserable for the people involved.
Yeah.
It basically acted like a forensic erasure.
It destroyed potential evidence.
Rapidly. Think about the primary tools they had back then, especially for tracking a lost person in the woods. Bloodhounds, right? Scent tracking.
Gone. The rain would have saturated everything.
Instantly washed away any specific scent molecules Dennis might have left behind and any subtle footprints, in soft earth or mud near a stream.
Completely obliterated, waterlogged, indistinguishable. The environment itself basically sabotaged any chance of an effective initial track.
And it gets worse. The rain also brought a severe temperature drop. It went from a presumably mild June afternoon to plummeting down near 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 10 Celsius.
That's cold, especially for a little kid.
Dangerously cold.
Yeah.
For a small child, potentially already lost, confused, and now likely soaking wet, hypothermia becomes an immediate, potentially fatal threat within hours. So even if he hadn't had an accident like falling, the elements themselves were actively working against his survival. It's like they were trying to erase him.
So that initial phase, it's just defined by this terrible combination of delay and environmental sabotage.
Exactly. But once the official notification happened and the scale of the problem became clear, the response that followed was, well, it was truly monumental. It shifted this from a local tragedy into a national incident.
And it remains, even today, the largest search and rescue operation in the entire history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
That's right. The effort went on for weeks. Sources estimate over 13,000 hours of searching time were logged.
13,000 hours. And the number of people.
The scale is just staggering. At its peak, they mobilized up to 1,400 personnel. And this wasn't just park rangers and local volunteers, though there were many of those. The sources confirm the involvement of the FBI, the National Guard, and this is the part that always raises eyebrows, a highly unusual contingent of U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets.
We'll definitely need to circle back to the Green Berets later.
Yeah.
But first, the search area itself. How big an area did they cover?
They were tasked with combing a colossal 56 square mile area. Just to give you some perspective, that's nearly the size of Washington, D.C.
56 square miles of dense, rugged mountain terrain.
Exactly. And they focused intensely on the most treacherous parts. The steep ravines, stream banks, and those infamous rhododendron thickets. Locals call them hells for a reason. They're so dense you could lose a car in them, let alone a small child.
Okay, so massive effort, military involvement, huge area covered, thousands of hours. And yet, here's the core mystery, right? The paradox that fuels all the speculation.
The zero evidence mystery, despite the incredible scope, the expertise involved, the sheer time spent, no conclusive, verifiable trace of Dennis Martin was ever found.
Nothing. No shred of that bright red shirt.
Hmm.
No little shoe. No physical remains.
Nothing definitive. It just defies logical probability. Statistically, if he had succumbed to the elements or had an accident, something, a piece of clothing, a bone fragment, something should have eventually turned up, especially with that level of search intensity.
Was there anything at all? Any hints?
There was one potential clue, though it was quickly dismissed. They found some child-sized footprints, barefoot prints actually, leading down to a stream, and then they just disappeared at the water's edge.
Okay, that sounds potentially significant. Why was it dismissed?
Well, officials at the time concluded that those footprints were likely left by a teenage Boy Scout who was part of the large volunteer search effort. Maybe he'd taken his boots off to cross a stream or something.
So they decided it wasn't Dennis.
They decided it wasn't Dennis. Whether that was the right call or not, who knows? But officially, it wasn't considered evidence related to him. So the case remained utterly sterile. No physical proof of what happened.
And when you have a complete vacuum of facts like that, it just becomes fertile ground for speculation, doesn't it?
Invariably. Which brings us neatly to the main theories. We can basically group the explanations that have emerged over the last 55 years into 3 primary categories.
Okay, let's walk through them. Theory 1, this is the one generally favored by the park authorities, the sort of official line, accidental death and environmental exposure. Basically, the cruel indifference of nature.
Right. Park officials generally concluded that Dennis likely became disoriented very quickly, easy for a 6-year-old in unfamiliar, dense woods panicked, and then succumbed to hypothermia due to that sudden cold, wet weather. They argued that his small size, his lack of wilderness survival knowledge, it just made him incredibly vulnerable. His ability to survive would have deteriorated rapidly.
That theory still has to account for the missing body. If he just died of exposure, where is he?
That's the weak point, obviously. The physical explanation offered is that he might have fallen into one of the many natural hazards in the Smokies. Our sources mention things like hidden sinkholes, deep rock crevasses, or maybe just becoming hopelessly entangled in that super thick undergrowth, those rhododendron slicks.
The idea being the brush itself acted like an accidental burial site.
Essentially, yeah, that it was so dense it hit him completely. While this is officially considered the most probable theory, mainly because it doesn't require bringing in an outside human factor, it really hinges on an incredibly unlucky, almost statistically improbable set of circumstances. The idea that a body could be hidden so perfectly in an area that was so intensely searched and has been frequently traversed since, that not a single trace has ever been found by thousands of trained people over decades. It's a huge statistical hurdle for this theory.
Yeah, it feels like if he was just covered by brush, eventually decomposition, animals, something would have exposed him.
Yeah.
Or later searches, maybe with better tech, would have found something. But nothing.
Exactly. Which naturally leads people to consider theory 2, animal predation. This seems like a simple explanation for a missing body in a wilderness area like the Smokies, an attack by a large animal.
And the likely suspects there would be what? Bears?
Black bears are the main candidate, yes. They are plentiful in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Some people might mention wildcats, like bobcats, or maybe even a mountain lion, though they're much more elusive and documented attacks are rarer. But a desperate or surprised bear could certainly overpower a small child.
Okay, plausible on the surface. But again, we hit that same wall, don't we?
The zero evidence wall, immediately. In almost all documented cases of bear attacks or attacks by large predators, there is some kind of evidence left behind. Signs of a struggle, blood, torn clothing, scattered remains, even if the animal tries to catch the body. Especially in those first few hours before the heavy rain hit, you'd expect something. The sources really emphasize this critical lack of any physical evidence consistent with an animal attack.
Right. A bear attack is usually messy. They don't typically consume everything, including sturdy clothing like shorts or shoes, and meticulously hide every single bone fragment, all within a short time frame before a massive search descends on the area. The sheer cleanliness of the scene just doesn't fit with a violent animal encounter.
It really doesn't. So, okay, if nature didn't flawlessly hide him and an animal didn't flawlessly consume him, we have to pivot to the third and, frankly, most alarming theory, human abduction. This is the idea that Dennis didn't just wander off or fall victim to the environment or wildlife, but that he was deliberately taken, removed from the area by a person.
And this theory isn't just pure speculation. It's anchored almost entirely by one specific, crucial, and highly controversial piece of witness testimony, the report filed by the Harold Key family.
Yes, the Key family sighting. They were tourists just driving through a different part of the park on that same day, June 14th, but they didn't report what they saw and heard until about 5 weeks after Dennis disappeared. Their statement to the FBI is probably the single most tantalizing and frustrating loose end in this entire case.
Okay, let's break down their report. What did they claim, and where and when did it happen relative to Dennis vanishing?
All right, so their sighting occurred roughly 1 hour after Dennis was last seen up at Spencefield. But, and this is important, they were located 5 to 7 miles away from Spencefield, down near a road called Highway 441, I believe, or a trail near it.
5 to 7 miles in an hour. That implies someone moving pretty fast, either running hard or maybe even using a vehicle on park roads.
Exactly. It implies rapid movement away from the disappearance site. Now, the Keys account had 2 really specific, really disturbing elements. First, they said they heard the sound coming from the dense woods near where they were. They described it as an enormous, sickening scream, the kind of sound that just stops you in your tracks.
A scream. And then
shortly after hearing that scream, they saw a man. He was moving quickly, maybe running, on a trail that ran sort of parallel to the road they were on. They described him as looking unkempt, shaggy, sort of rough-looking.
Okay, a suspicious man near where they heard a scream. But the critical detail, the one that links it potentially to Dennis, is what he was carrying.
That's the absolute kicker. The keys claimed this man was carrying something slung over his shoulder, and they described it as looking like cloth or clothing.
Cloth or clothing. And Dennis was wearing a bright red shirt.
Precisely. The implication is chilling and unavoidable. Was this the man who took Dennis? Was that Dennis himself, or perhaps just his clothing being carried away?
Wow. You can see why the Martin family would have latched onto this.
Oh, absolutely. The Martin family was reportedly already leaning towards believing someone had taken Dennis. This report must have seemed like confirmation. They immediately offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to Dennis's recovery.
$5,000 in 1969 money. That's a lot.
It is. Adjusting for inflation, it's equivalent to over $44,000 today. That's a substantial amount, and it really highlights how strongly they believed in this abduction scenario and how desperate they were for answers.
Okay, if we take the Key family report at face value, it completely changes the narrative. It's not a wilderness tragedy, it's a crime. A kidnapping.
It potentially is. But, and it's a huge but, we absolutely have to address the massive elephant in the room. Why did they wait 5 weeks to report this to the FBI or any law enforcement?
Yeah, that 5-week delay is the major problem with this testimony, isn't it?
Yeah.
It significantly complicates how credible it is.
It does. You have to ask. If you heard a sickening scream and then saw a suspicious-looking man carrying something that looked like clothing over his shoulder near an area where you later learn a child in a red shirt went missing, why wouldn't you report that immediately?
What reasons have been suggested for the delay?
Our sources suggest a few possibilities. One, the Keys were tourists. They were passing through. They might not have immediately connected their creepy roadside experience with the news reports about a missing boy, especially if those reports were initially localized.
Maybe they didn't even hear about Dennis being missing until they were long gone from the area.
That's plausible. They might have only put 2 and 2 together weeks later when the story gained more national attention. Another possibility is simple fear. Perhaps they were intimidated by the man they saw or worried about getting involved.
Or just uncertainty. Maybe they weren't sure what they saw was relevant.
Could be. But whatever the reason for the delay, the consequence was devastating from an investigative standpoint. By the time they reported it 5 weeks later, any potential physical evidence connected to that running man or the specific location where the scream was heard, it was long gone. Any scent trail, any footprints, any dropped items, impossible to find.
So the FBI had to treat the report with a lot of caution.
Extreme caution, understandably. But despite that justified skepticism, the image described is so specific, so vivid. The shaggy, rough-looking man carrying cloth or clothing. It doesn't sound like something easily invented. It has the ring of a genuine, disturbing memory. It remains the single strongest piece of evidence, however flawed, pointing towards foul play by another human being.
Okay, so we have accidental death exposure, animal attack, and human abduction potentially evidenced by the Key sighting. But there's another layer of speculation, right? The theories that emerged largely because of the nature of the search itself.
Yes, the conspiracy theories, or maybe just intense speculation surrounding the military involvement. This is where we get back to the Green Berets.
Green Beret angle. This one definitely has legs online, even decades later.
It really does, and you can understand why. The involvement of U.S. Army Special Forces in a search for a missing 6-year-old civilian child is, by any standard measure, highly irregular. These guys weren't your typical search and rescue team.
They were elite soldiers, trained for very different things.
Exactly. Clandestine operations, unconventional warfare, expert tracking, yes, but usually in hostile territory overseas. This was 1969, the height of the Vietnam War era. So their presence in the Smokies looking for a lost boy was odd.
What was the official reason given for them being there?
The official line was pretty straightforward. They were based relatively nearby, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. They had specialized tracking skills suitable for that kind of rugged terrain, and they were brought in to lend their expertise to the massive effort already underway. Basically, an available resource with relevant skills.
But that explanation didn't satisfy everyone.
Not by a long shot. Public perception, especially amplified by later internet discussions, tended to reject that simple explanation. The speculation took a different turn. The core idea is that the military's heavy involvement wasn't just about finding Dennis. It hinted that maybe the military knew something or was involved somehow. Perhaps they were conducting some kind of sensitive, maybe even classified training operation deep in the park that same weekend.
And the theory goes that Dennis somehow stumbled upon this operation.
That's one version, that he accidentally saw something he shouldn't have. Or, an even darker version, that there was some kind of accident involving military personnel or equipment. Maybe he was mistaken for an intruder in a restricted area, or perhaps even hit by an unmarked military vehicle on a remote park road.
And this theory would then explain two key mysteries at once.
That's the appeal of it, yes. First, it explains the sheer intensity and the high-level coordination of the search involving the FBI, National Guard, and Special Forces. It wasn't just about finding a lost boy. It was about securing a scene, managing information, perhaps recovering something sensitive.
And second, and maybe more importantly for the theorists, it offers a potential explanation for the complete lack of evidence.
Exactly. If Dennis's body needed to be removed quickly and discreetly, who better to do it than highly trained special forces capable of executing a covert extraction and leaving no trace? It suggests a cover-up.
So the failure to find Dennis wasn't necessarily because nature hid him so well, but because a highly efficient human organization removed him.
That's the narrative. It's compelling because it shifts the blame from the indifference of nature or the randomness of a lone predator abductor to the calculated actions of a powerful institution. Of course, there's zero concrete evidence to support this. It remains pure speculation fueled by the unusual circumstances.
Which brings us to the cultural legacy of this case. It hasn't faded away. It keeps getting brought up, doesn't it?
Constantly. The Dennis Martin case is a staple in discussions about mysterious disappearances, particularly in places like the Missing 411 forums and databases that track clusters of unusual missing persons cases in national parks and remote wilderness areas.
Why do you think it endures so strongly in the public imagination?
I think it's that terrifying ambiguity. It hits on so many primal fears. The fear of losing a child, the fear of the vast, uncontrollable wilderness, the fear of hidden dangers, maybe even hidden conspiracies. It's the perfect storm. A relatable, heartbreaking family tragedy combined with a completely unanswerable, frightening mystery. It's become symbolic, in a way, of the unforgiving nature of the wild. This idea that the world outside our controlled environments is capable of just erasing someone without explanation.
Okay, let's try to synthesize some of this as we move toward wrapping up. Looking back at all the factors, what combination of events really seems most likely to have caused this complete erasure of evidence?
Well, if we stick to the most grounded explanations, it really does look like a perfect storm of negative factors all converging at once. You start with the terrain itself. The Great Smoky Mountains are uniquely rugged, incredibly dense vegetation. Locating anyone, even an adult who stays put, can be extremely difficult.
Then you layer on that immediate torrential rainstorm.
Crucial. It acted like a rapid forensic cleanup. It sterilized the ground, washing away scent, destroying footprints, potentially obscuring blood trails if there had been an injury or attack. It bought time for nature, or potentially a person, to conceal things further.
And don't forget the human element of that systemic delay.
Absolutely critical. Those 4 hours lost between Dennis vanishing and the organized search getting underway, 4 hours is an eternity for a small child in those conditions. It's enough time for him to wander a surprising distance, to hide effectively in panic, or, tragically, to fall into a deep crevice, a sinkhole, or get swept into a stream that became a raging torrent with the rain places even a massive search might miss initially.
But the paradox still gnaws at you, doesn't it? 1,400 people, 56 square miles, weeks of searching, and absolutely nothing.
It's the core analytical challenge. That sheer scale of effort versus the utter lack of results. It really suggests only two possibilities, logically. Either he was hidden with extraordinary natural efficiency, think, a deep, concealed cave, a sinkhole covered over quickly, something truly exceptional, or he was removed from the search area with extraordinary human efficiency. The scale of the unsuccessful search almost argues against simple exposure or getting lost in hiding. It seems to imply a more definitive concealment or removal.
Which forces us back to the abduction theory, and specifically the Key family report. If we discount the more elaborate Green Beret conspiracy and find the animal attack unlikely due to lack of evidence.
Then abduction, despite the issues with the key report, becomes the primary alternative explanation for the zero evidence found within the search zone.
How much weight can we realistically give that report, though, considering the 5-week delay?
It's tough. The FBI was right to be skeptical. Memory fades, details get confused. But again, you come back to the specificity of the image. The shaggy man, running, carrying cloth or clothing. It feels visceral. It doesn't sound like a vague recollection. It sounds like something they saw.
The logistics. Could someone actually carry a 6-year-old boy 5 to 7 miles through mountain terrain in about an hour?
It's pushing it, but it's physically possible, especially if the person knew the trails well, maybe used less traveled routes, or even had access to a vehicle parked strategically near an access point. It would require speed, determination, and probably some luck to avoid being seen by others.
So the key report remains this fragile, uncertain thread suggesting human malice.
That's exactly. It's the one piece that forces us to confront the possibility that the wilderness, the park itself, might have just been the setting for the crime, not the cause. That someone used the natural environment and the initial chaos as cover for a planned abduction and a clean getaway.
Regardless of which theory one leans towards, this tragedy had lasting consequences beyond the family, didn't it? It impacted the institutions involved.
Profoundly. An unsuccessful search of this magnitude with this much attention couldn't just be filed away and forgotten by the authorities. One of the major long-term legacies of the Dennis Martin case is that it directly led to a critical review and overhaul of the National Park Service's search and rescue protocols.
How so? What changed?
Primarily, that devastating 4-hour communication delay really highlighted a systemic weakness in how aid was mobilized for incidents in remote park areas back in 1969. Relying on someone to hike 9 miles was just not acceptable when time was critical.
So they needed faster communication and response initiation.
Precisely. Our sources indicate that the failures in the Martin case spurred changes aimed at speeding up internal park communications and mandating much faster mobilization response times, especially when the missing person is considered highly vulnerable, like a child. The Park Service essentially learned a hard lesson. When potential evidence is ephemeral, like a scent trail in the rain, time is the only asset you can really control in those initial stages. The SAR protocols implemented after 1969 put a much stronger emphasis on establishing immediate, centralized command structures, utilizing whatever communication tech was available, and bypassing those long, slow, manual reporting chains.
And the Dennis Martin search remains the benchmark.
It remains the largest search the Great Smoky Mountains National Park has ever conducted. It serves as a constant, sobering operational reminder of the stakes involved and the potential for catastrophic failure, even with massive resources.
So as we wrap up, let's reflect one last time on why this particular story, out of so many missing persons cases, continues to resonate so deeply, generation after generation.
I think it boils down to the horrifying simplicity of it, coupled with that complete, profound absence of closure. A little boy playing hide and seek on a family camping trip vanishes in broad daylight. His family turns around and he's just gone. No warning, no obvious danger beforehand. And because there's never been a body found, there's no definitive truth, no single answer. That ambiguity is fertile ground for endless speculation, but it also means the story never really ends. It constantly challenges our sense of safety, our understanding of the world, our vulnerability.
It's a terrifying thought, isn't it, that something or someone so small, so precious, can be instantly and utterly erased, either by the sheer immensity and indifference of the natural world,
or perhaps by the swift, calculated, and equally indifferent action of another person.
It really forces you to ask yourself which possibility is truly more frightening. The planned, malicious act of a human being, or the random, swift, uncaring chaos of nature that needs no motive and offers no answers.
A question with no easy answer.
We close this exploration today with deep empathy for the Martin family. They have lived for over half a century without knowing what happened to Dennis. He remains officially unsolved, presumed deceased. The search for a 6-year-old boy in a bright red shirt continues, in a way, metaphorically, to this day. He represents all the unanswered questions the wilderness holds on to.
Next time on Threads of Truth, we look at the chilling 1953 disappearance of Evelyn Hartley, a teenage babysitter who vanished while on the job, leaving behind a home in disarray and a trail of clues that led nowhere.